Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, this would be catastrophic, what our world leaders are positioning us to experience right now. Talk about that in just a second, but first I want to turn your attention to this. If you haven't signed up to the Substack on brittgillette.substack.com, you may have missed this article from yesterday about God's overlooked prophecy. And I believe personally, with about 99.9% assurance, that this prophecy will be fulfilled in the expected lifetime of the people on earth today. So if you don't know what this is, make sure to go check it out and read about this. Also, if you missed it on Wednesday night, there was a prophecy roundtable that live streamed on AI, technology, and transhumanism. I was part of that along with John Haller, Patrick Wood, and Scott Townsend. So if you missed out on that, make sure to go check that out. You can just go check out the channel on YouTube and hit the live tab. Or you can come over to the Substack and click on the interviews tab, and you will see that right there in the first entry. So what are we talking about when we say this could be catastrophic? I believe the world is just sleepwalking into a potentially catastrophic situation, and it involves this right here. So this is from Zero Hedge. It says Kremlin claims NATO training for nuclear strike on Russian territory. And we're going to talk in a moment about how this is escalatory, how this could lead very quickly to a nuclear conflict that neither side necessarily wants. But this is what happens when you play these types of games. It says, the week following Russia holding tactical nuclear, they write nearly here, but it's nuclear drills, in its southern military district near Ukraine, the Kremlin is alleging that NATO is secretly engaged in drills which seek to prepare for a potential nuclear strike on Russian territory. General Vladimir Kuleshov, first deputy director and head of Russia's Federal Security Service's Border Service, has said the military has observed increased NATO military activity near Russia, which includes fresh nuclear drills. So guys, both sides, both Russia and NATO, are running these active nuclear drills, and that should be concerning to everybody in the world. It says he stated in an interview with State RIA Novosti News that near the Russian border, NATO's reconnaissance activities are increasing. The intensity of operational combat training of the alliance's troops is growing, during which scenarios for conducting combat operations against the Russian Federation, including the launch of nuclear strikes on our territory, are being worked out. And again, no matter what people say, if they say, well, this is overblown, it's just a training exercise, keep in mind, it's not necessarily, maybe that's true, but it doesn't matter what's true. What matters is what the perception on the part of Russia is. And if Russia feels threatened and decides to respond with a nuclear strike, it really didn't matter that it was just a training exercise. And we're going to talk about how close we've come in the past to that and how dangerous this is in just a moment. It says Kuleshov added, the situation requires taking appropriate steps to protect and secure our borders. NATO itself has not confirmed that it is engaged in nuclear drills near Russia, and it's unclear the degree to which General Kuleshov was merely speculating or perhaps reading into things based on the serious threats from the West that Moscow currently perceives. Again, does it really matter if he's correct or reading into something that's not there if the outcome is the same? And the outcome is an undesirable one. Doesn't really matter. Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, has also said separately that, quote, NATO is flirting with military rhetoric, increasing the degree of escalation and falling into military ecstasy. I'm not Not really sure what that's supposed to mean. But guys, this is an extremely dangerous situation. And to show just how dangerous, again, NATO can say, well, this is just a military exercise. We're not threatening Russia. Russia perceives it differently, and we have precedent from the past in regard to this. So let's turn to this article right here from the Smithsonian Magazine. It says, History, the 1983 military drill that nearly sparked nuclear war with the Soviets. Fearful that Able Archer 83 exercise was a cover for a NATO nuclear strike, the USSR readied its own weapons for launch. Guys, we came very close back in 1983 to nuclear conflict based on a NATO exercise that was perceived as a preemptive nuclear strike by the Soviet Union. So let's read all about that. I've talked about this before. It says, in November 1983, during a particularly tense period in the Cold War, Soviet observers spotted planes carrying what appeared to be warheads taxiing out of their NATO hangars. Shortly after, command centers for the NATO military alliance exchanged a flurry of communication, and after receiving reports that their Soviet adversaries had used chemical weapons, the United States decided to intensify readiness to DEFCON 1, the highest of the nuclear threat categories, surpassing the DEFCON 2 alert declared at the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis 2 decades prior. Concerned about a preemptive strike, Soviet forces prepared their nuclear weapons for launch. And you may say, well, none of that ever happened. They never got to DEFCON 1, and chemical weapons weren't used by the Soviets. Let's keep reading. It says, there was just one problem. None of the NATO escalation was real, at least not in the minds of the Western forces participating in the Able Archer 83 war game. So this occurred within the war game of NATO forces, but they were really doing these things. They were taxiing warheads out of their hangars. There was a flurry of communication going on. They, within the exercise, changed the readiness to DEFCON 1. So, from the Soviet perception, all of this was real. So keep that in mind as we're reading. It says, a variation of an annual military training exercise, the scenario started with a change in Soviet leadership, heightened proxy rivalries, and the Soviets' invasion of several European countries. Lasting 5 days, it culminated in NATO resorting to the use of nuclear weapons. Soviet intelligence watched the event with special interest, suspicious that the U.S. might carry out a nuclear strike under the guise of a drill. The realism of Able Archer was ironically effective. It was designed to simulate the start of a nuclear war, and many argued that it almost did. In response to this exercise, the Soviets readied their forces, including their nuclear forces, in a way that scared NATO decision makers, eventually all the way up to President Reagan, says Nate Jones, author of Able Archer 83, The Secret History of the NATO Exercise That Almost Triggered Nuclear War, and a senior fellow at the National Security Archive. Perhaps most concerning is that the danger was largely unknown and overlooked both during the exercise and throughout that precarious year, when changes in leadership and an acceleration in nuclear arms race ratcheted up tensions between the two superpowers. A since declassified 1990 report by the President's Foreign Intelligence Review Board concluded, quote, in 1983, we may have inadvertently placed our relations with the Soviet Union on a hair trigger, meaning we were within a hair trigger pull of nuclear war. And of course, this article is from about 2 years ago, so they liken this to the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and it says almost 40 years later, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has evoked comparisons with the Cold War, particularly when it comes to Russian President Putin's vaguely worded threats. At the onset of the war, Putin warned of, quote, consequences you have never seen, a declaration interpreted in some quarters as a nod to his country's nuclear capabilities. More recently, President Biden's announcement of new weapons for Ukraine elicited an admonition from Moscow about unpredictable consequences. Biden has declined to send American troops and cautioned that, quote, direct confrontation between NATO and Russia is World War III. Sorry about that, guys. The screen, it appears, went dark for a moment. For whatever reason, the computer program crashed. So I'm going to try to piece this back together and continue with the recording. Hopefully that works. But guys, what we're seeing happen right now is, again, we've been over this before. We're at DEFCON level 3 for what's considered the longest period of time by far in history. Now, we don't know that for sure. That's not public information. But we've talked in the past about there are signals intelligence and internet services that make the projection of what level we're on. And I think the longest we've ever been in that level, it's only maybe like 3 times we've ever been in that level, and we're really talking for a few days. We've been at that level for over 2 years now since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Tensions have never been this high, but most people seem oblivious to the whole thing. And yet, we see how an exercise like this could be misinterpreted and lead to a nuclear war. Let's take a look at, say, just this headline right here. Ukraine targets radars that are part of Russia's nuclear warning system. Now, they may say, well, that's not because NATO's planning a preemptive nuclear strike. Right, but if Russia interprets it that way based on what you're doing, is it really worth it? Why do you keep pressing this issue? This could erupt at any moment. Now, all that said, do I believe that Russia and NATO are going to go into a state of all-out war with nuclear weapons launched all over the world that destroys humanity? No. The Bible does not indicate that. The Bible shows that humanity continues on right up into the moment that Jesus Christ returns to earth. So humanity is not wiped out by nuclear war. We know that. I don't even think that there's a catastrophic global nuclear war. I don't see where the Bible teaches that. However, you can still have a limited nuclear conflict. We've seen nuclear weapons used before at the end of World War II. We could see nuclear weapons used on a limited scale in terms of a strike on a city or a region, and not have that erupt into a global nuclear war. But guys, the outcome would still be highly undesirable. Forgetting for a moment the people who would be in the direct path of those nuclear weapons, the impact to the global supply chain and financial markets means that every single person on Earth would be directly impacted in such an event. So why they continue to pursue these policies that bring us to the brink of nuclear war, I have no idea, other than it's a sign of the times in which we live. So the Bible tells us that, guys. Here in Matthew 24, verses 6 through 8, Jesus said, you will hear of wars and threats of wars, but don't panic. And I would assure you, don't panic over this. This is something we need to be watching for, we need to be observant of, we need to be mindful of, but we don't need to be in a state of panic over this. It says, yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world, but all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. What is Jesus talking about here? Well, he's talking about the birth pains that will lead to his return. So in this event, the birth pains are building up to this climactic point in history where Jesus returns to earth. So guys, while these things are terrible, we can have hope knowing that Christ is coming back. So again, we shouldn't have a spirit of fear over this. If you know Jesus, you should have a peace that surpasses all understanding. So what should you be doing in the midst of all of this? With all, not just what we're seeing here, but all of these terrible threats to freedom, liberty, peace, your family, yourself, your way of life. How should we be operating in this environment? Well, the Bible tells us. Let's look at some verses. Here we have Isaiah chapter 26, verse 3. It says, "You will keep in perfect peace all who trust in you, all whose thoughts are fixed on you." Guys, fix your thoughts on Jesus Christ. Fix your thoughts on all that is good and pure. Fix your thoughts on his word. Trust in him, and you will be kept in perfect peace. So that's how you can have peace in the midst of all this chaos and turmoil. Let's take a look at this. Philippians chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. It says, "Don't worry about anything." Does it say, except for nuclear war or central bank digital currencies? No, there's no exceptions. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. So we should be engaged in prayer constantly in the midst of all of this. So make sure that you are praying. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. So if you want to experience that peace, you should be praying to God, telling him what you need, thanking him for what he has done. Make sure you're doing those things. How about John chapter 14, verse 27? This is Jesus speaking, and he says, "I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid." Guys, we don't need to be troubled. We don't need to be afraid. We don't need to be fearful in these times. We can have peace but because of our relationship with Jesus Christ. Jesus has already achieved the victory. He has conquered death. He has conquered the grave. And he has done that not just for himself, but for us. You know, with the Bible says we're all sinners. We all fall short of God's standard of perfection. And the Bible says the wages of sin is death, meaning that's our destination. We are bound for death. We are bound for eternal separation from God in hell because of our sin. But the good news is, and this is what also the Bible tells us, the good news is that while we were still sinners, Jesus Christ, who was perfect and sinless, he went to the cross and he died on the cross. He shed his blood. He served as the sacrifice to pay the penalty for our sin, paid in full. And he rose from the dead. He conquered the grave. He lives in victory today. Because of what he did, we are reconciled with God. When God looks upon you as a believer, he sees his one and only Son. He sees that perfection in you. We are redeemed through Jesus Christ. He has won the victory regardless of anything that happens in this world. Guys, that's the great news, and it should give you peace in these times of sorrow and turmoil. So guys, Yes, the world is a mess, and it's only going to get worse. But what does Revelation 19:10 tell us? The essence of prophecy is to give a clear witness for Jesus Christ. So we need to be sharing the good news, sharing of the hope we have. We need to be showing people the peace we have in the midst of all that's going on, so that they say, why do you have this peace and how do I get it? And then we can tell them all about Jesus. So guys, what do you think? Leave your comments below. Maybe it's no big deal. A few nuclear weapons go flying around. I think that it is. But maybe you think differently. Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. God willing, I will see you on Monday. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to visit my Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. There you'll find my latest videos and articles, as well as notes, where I share the latest news headlines, the articles I'm reading, and the videos I'm watching. Subscribe for free, and each new post on Substack will be sent directly to your email. Just scroll to the bottom of the homepage and hit the subscribe button. As an added bonus, your first welcome email will include a link to a copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.